Hi, sociology students. This is Mrs. T. I'm working from my home classroom, so the echo might be a little bit weird, and I'm also working on a little bit better lighting so we don't have these weird glares and also like shadows and stuff, so I'm sorry about that. And not that it's really important that you see anything because you can just listen to this or maybe look at a snapshot or something of the board that I have drawn behind me for our introductory lesson of Unit 2, which is going to cover Chapter 4, some of Chapter 5, and Chapter 6. And this will round us out toward midterm when we will have a midterm test. But before that happens, we're going to go ahead with our regular weekly reaction papers due every Saturday at noon, and our regular weekly quizzes due every Sunday at noon. And there's one more project that you will be working on. In the middle of next week is when I will assign that to you. And it's going to basically be kind of an autobiography sort of thing, a sociological autobiography, where you look at some of the stuff that we're going to talk about this week regarding social structure and the components of social structure, and you kind of plug yourself in so that you try to determine the link between macro scale forces that guide your life choices and your individual social experiences on the micro level. Like, what's the link between this? We've been talking about that link a whole lot. We've talked about how important it is to develop our sociological imagination. If we look at our course learning outcomes, sociological imagination is part of it. Understanding components of social structure are other parts of it. Relating theories to our daily lives and current events. All of these things, you might be able to see a connection between those course learning outcomes that are listed on our syllabus and listed on each of the projects that I assign to you, and the coursework that we've been doing in class, because there's a major link, right? None of this is busy work. We are working toward that final goal of understanding and developing our sociological imagination and seeing connections between macro level stuff in society and micro level life experiences in our daily comings and goings and doings that happen in our daily lives. Okay. So we get to be more in depth in Unit 2 than we were in Unit 1. So Unit 1 was really foundational. We learned what sociology was to begin with. We learned what culture is. We learned what socialization is. And so all of that is leading up to a deeper understanding of the topics that we're going to discuss in class together today. So I've drawn this picture on the board as best I can. Draw pictures on the board to try to show you the link, these overlapping circles, to try to show you the link between the macro scale parts of society and the micro scale parts of society. So this will be a little bit different than typically what I would do when I had a huge whiteboard in our physical classroom at the university, when I would write key words to a definition. For instance, social structure is a key term that I'm introducing to you officially in Chapter 4, officially with an official definition. We've used the concept social structure many times in many of our discussions that we've had so far together, but now we're going to get some keywords associated with it. Now, you can find the definition of social structure in Chapter 4 of our textbook, but some key terms that must go in a good definition of social structure is that it is a complex mix of these three things that I have written on the board here. I'm pointing at social institutions, I'm pointing at statuses and roles, and I'm pointing at social groups. So it's a complex framework, it's a complex blueprint that incorporates macro scale components of our of social life, all the way through the middle levels to micro level sociology. Also, it's a complex blueprint that incorporates social institutions, it incorporates statuses and roles, and it incorporates social groups. So today, we're going to investigate this a little bit deeper, and in grading Project 1, many of you did really, really well on Project 1, but a lot of the people who missed points mainly because we're not quite comfortable yet zooming out enough to know what macro really means. A lot of times if you missed points on explaining functionalism, or if you missed points on explaining conflict theory, usually it was because you were too small group oriented, because we don't have enough practice yet. This is week 5. We don't have enough practice yet really zooming out on macro. Some of you did really well with this, but today, if you had trouble on project 1, you've gotten a comment from me that, identified the problem areas and what you need to review. But if I asked you to review macro levels, social parts of the social structure, pardon me, if I asked you to review that, this lecture today will really help with your understanding, going back to what we've talked about from chapter 1 up through chapter 3, and then this lecture today. Because mostly what we're going to focus on, just so I can keep it short, keep the lecture not too long. Mostly what we're going to focus on today is this first bubble here regarding social structure. So we're going to talk about what social institutions are. I know we've mentioned them many times in class before, but maybe we've not really gotten a concise explanation or a definition for what they are. And so we're going to do that today. We're going to get examples, and we're going to get concise ideas about what statuses and roles are, and also social groups, but not go in depth in these until additional lectures this week. So please note, I hope you can see it, I hope it's coming through on the video, that I've got circles that are connected like links in a chain, because each of these 3 components of social structure do not exist in separate boxes that are stored separately from each other up on shelves or something. They overlap, they touch, they are linked. There is a constant connection between macro, what I'm pointing to on the board right now, macro sociology, all the way over here to the left-hand side of the board, constantly all the way over here to the right-hand side of the board, where I've got micro ideas linked over here, okay? So we are going to look in this unit, and project 2 is going to be about your ability to analyze your own social situation and identify and recognize the macro scale parts of the social institutions and the parts of social structure that affects the position that you hold in society today, the behaviors associated with that position, and the obligations that you have to your peers in the social groups that you belong to. So that's kind of what project 2, is going to be all about. Okay, so let me erase, here's my eraser, let me erase for the time being statuses and roles and social groups from this gorgeous picture that I have on the board, because we're going to need some space to talk about social institutions. Okay, so let me just take a second to do that. I'll leave social institutions in its little circle over here. But there we go, I've got some clean space on the board. So, social institutions is another word that is defined for you really early on in chapter 4. I will just say that social institutions are abstract ideas. They are beliefs and notions about how things need to take place in a society to fulfill the needs that a population has. So society is made up of people. Collectively on the macro scale, huge populations of people. Society has needs. If you think of society as a thing, society as an entity, like the human body is a thing and it's got tiny little cells all in it, I don't know, ask your biology teacher approximately how many individual cells are in a body, a human body. You can think of society as that, using that metaphor, you can think of society the same way. Society is a thing, like the whole human body, but people, like individual cells in the body, people make up that society. On the macro scale, society as a whole has certain needs in order to continue over time. A functionalist says that social structure and social institutions are designed in a way that supports stability and order for that society moving forward. There's a whole bunch of social institutions that are linked together, and they're linked together in predictable orderly ways that take care of the needs of a population, so the population can continue from generation to generation. As we said, culture is passed from generation to generation. This social structure, having a macro scale framework of social institutions that are interconnected, keeps society available and moving forward from one generation to the next. Let's not forget conflict theory. Conflict theory would say, yes, social institutions exist. We're about to get examples of those social institutions. Yes, they exist. However, the way that these social institutions have been designed over time benefits some large portions of the population, while it disadvantages other large portions of the population. So social institutions are part of your macro scale social structure. However, if you look at it with the glasses called conflict theory, you would say these social institutions are designed in a way that advantage some and disadvantage others. In general, you can call those groups the haves versus the have-nots. What do they have and have not? Maybe it's wealth. Maybe it's political authority. Maybe it's civil rights. Maybe it's voting rights. Whatever it is, if you look at large-scale social institutions, which is what functionalism and conflict theorists do, conflict theorists look for the fundamental inequalities built into the system. They identify those inequalities and suggest fixes. And a functionalist says these social institutions have built up over time to fulfill needs of the population in a stable, orderly way to move it forward. If there's inequalities in the system, fine, it's because there's inequalities in society. Not everybody or everything has an equal social value, and therefore it should be that way to make sure that all the work gets done or society is stable and orderly moving forward. And if social change happens, a functionalist, I saw that some of you got this incorrect on Project 1 also. A functionalist is not opposed to social change at all. No, a functionalist recognizes that social change is going to happen, but as long as it happens in a punctuated, I'll use an anthropology, an evolutionary anthropology term, a punctuated equilibrium, so to speak, where changes happen gradually so the whole system of interconnected parts can adjust to accommodate these new changes, then social change is something that provides a stable, orderly society moving forward. So a functionalist would say, hey, if you want to fix, if a society of people wants to fix the inequality, let's fix it in a stable, orderly way so that all of the other areas of society can adjust to the changes too, and move forward. So it's not, functionalists are not like opposed to social change or want to keep oppressed people oppressed. No, there's not like a political or an ideological bent like that. It just looks at all of the social institutions being connected to each other. Okay, so social institutions are beliefs and ideas about how things should be done on the macro scale to take care of the needs a population of people have. So, okay, for instance, I think I've mentioned in at least some of the classes that I've had face-to-face with you so far, that a major example that all of us can look at as a social institution is a concept, a macro scale concept. Look at this, I'm on the macro scale side of this board and I'm writing family. I typically do a capital F, it's just a Mrs. T thing. I typically do a capital F just to remind myself, hey, I'm talking about family as a macro scale concept, or in other words, a social institution. Family as a macro scale concept is a belief or an idea about how certain needs of the population of a society should be met. Now, what needs would family fulfill in a society? Well, reproduction is one of them, because when baby humans are born, baby humans need care. In our society, and many societies around the world, when family reproduces, who is supposed to take care of that child until that child is classified as an adult? The family members. Now, on a macro scale, a sociologist makes no commentary about who, look at my air quotes here, who should be a member of a family. Like, we're not going to say that on a micro scale, every family should have mommy and daddy and 2 kids. But mommy and daddy and 2 kids are the, again, let me put air quotes around this, are the typical or traditional structure of the family idea on the macro scale, because when we reproduce, little humans need care, and it costs money to maintain a household where you provide that care to all of the members, not just the little humans. Okay? So family is a social institution on the macro scale because of the connection that it has with another social institution, the economy, and with the connection that it has to providing future adults for the population to move forward. The family is supposed to train future adults so that they can take over and do this cycle over again so society can move forward from generation to generation. The family is responsible for a great deal for the education of those people to become adults. There's another link to another example of a social institution that family has. Remember, we say that social institutions are linked together to build up society as a whole. So family is linked to economy because it costs money to bring children into the world and to raise them up, or we rear human beings, we raise farm animals. We misuse that word in our social discussions. So pardon me for misusing that word, and maybe you can correct yourself if you do that all the time. But when we have little humans, we have an obligation based on law. So let me write these other things. I've said education system. I've said now we can say the legal system. There's all kinds of connections between the way the family, quote unquote, should operate on the macro scale that's linked to the economy, because a household costs money. And even the unpaid work in a household, like childcare and cooking and doing chores and all that kind of stuff that doesn't bring in a paycheck from the outside, that has a significant economic value. So the traditional, please notice my air quotes, and please notice that I'm making no political commentary about what a family should be like on the micro scale. But on the macro scale, for the majority of history, family has been multiple adults taking care of the children, people who are not adult or legally able to be responsible for themselves yet. And that is the economic structure. If you look at sectors of the economy like child care, there are sectors of the economy that if you have one parent with children, you're legally obligated to have those children supervised for a period of their youth at least, and you have to pay for that. If there's not an unpaid worker, wife, typically, if you want to look at it from the social conflict theory, typically this family work that keeps society stable over time was divided into breadwinner. Are we thinking of a male here? I don't want to put that thought in your head, but when we say breadwinner, again, traditionally, with air quotes around it, breadwinner meant man in the family and caregiver meant female in the family. So that's traditionally the way that family work was divided. And so if you don't have one or the other in a family, you have to decide, okay, what is the work that I'm going to pay for, that second unpaid adult member of the household would take care of if that second adult member of the household was there. So, family is responsible for producing future members of a society, and that's why it's a social institution, because societies can't continue if there's not population moving forward. That might sound funny to you, like duh, of course people are going to have babies, but there are countries in the world right now, Japan and South Korea being two that pop into my mind right away, where young people today are not reproducing. They are not forming quote unquote traditional families with many children at all, or not even one in some cases, because of the economic implications of having those children, at least when sociologists do social research to find out why the micro-scale behavior of these folks, of these young people who should be in their childbearing years, when we do research to find out why they're not reproducing, a lot of times you get economic answers, or you get answers about like freedom, for instance, because they're legally obligated um, to supervise, these kids, and if they aren't willing to do it themselves because it works away from their free and leisure time, they'd have to pay somebody else, which works against their money that they want to spend during their free and leisure time. And so these are some of the answers that young people today are saying when asked, why aren't you reproducing? So, look it up. Look up birth rates in Japan. Look up birth rates in South Korea, and look to see, are the older generations more populous than the younger generations? And I'm doing my hands like this because I also teach cultural geography, where we look at population pyramids that break down generations, 10-year sections of society, into male and female members. And when you have these bar graphs, and when they're fatter in the middle or fatter at the top than they are at the bottom, that means there's very low birth rate and higher populations in the middle-aged and the older sections. And so that means the population is shrinking over time if the birth rate is low. So in a society like ours, we don't have problems with wondering whether we're going to have enough population moving forward so that our country continues. So sometimes for my USA students, when they're learning this, they're like, that's the stupidest reason I've ever heard of for family to be a social institution. No, let's back up and take a global perspective, because if people stopped having children, would there be a population to make up a macro-scale society moving forward? After a while, no. Bye-bye population. And so that's one of the major functions of a family as a social institution in any society. It produces future members of society, and it also ensures, based on the norms of that society, so the norms span macro to micro behavior, so the norms exist and apply to pretty much everybody in society. We'll talk about this more when we get to the statuses and roles section of this discussion. And definitely norms affect our micro-scale interactions with people. But the norm in our country is, not only is family a social institution to put future members into the population, but since those future members are not able to take care of themselves, then the family is really legally obligated to be those caregivers until those children are of legal age to take care of themselves. Family is responsible also for a lot of the general socialization that takes place for children. In some cases, family is also responsible for some of the formal education that children are supposed to get. But when family cannot provide formal education, that's the connection to the education system. And since family is obligated to supervise children as they are growing up, the education system takes some of that responsibility off the shoulders of the family when we start required education levels at kindergarten. I believe kindergarten is required now. I don't think pre-K is required yet, or maybe it is in some places. Norms are different from place to place, right? So we could look that up. But the education system fills in the gaps where the family can't necessarily take care of those gaps. Maybe you do not speak English as your first language within the family, so the education system is going to provide English second language training so that that child can transition from the micro-scale family home life into macro-scale social life and have that common language to relate to other typical, I'm using air quotes a whole lot here, typical, average, expected, all these words in air quotes, people in society, since English is the expected language that we're going to speak in the United States. Not official language or anything, but the expected language. So education is linked to family for supervisory reasons, for training reasons that maybe the family is not able to provide for the children who are not able to legally be on their own yet. They're not legally able to work until a certain age, not legally able to work many hours until after certain ages. Children cost money to raise them, to rear them, pardon me, I did it again. The household costs money to maintain it. There's a lot of unpaid work that has to happen in the household. If there's not a family member available to do it, then you must pay other people to do it. So all of these things are connected. I wish I could draw well, because I could, show you how these things are all connected and to each other also, right? Each of these things are connected to each other also. And so one of the things that you're going to do in project 2, I can't get these project numbers straight today. One of the things you're going to do in project 2 is look at your position in society at the moment. And the position that you hold in society is something that we call a status. That was from this middle bubble that I erased to draw this stuff on the board. And you're going to look from that status position in society, what macro scale social institutions govern that position that you have in society. So if you are a daughter, then this macro scale social institution governs your position in society. And if your life experience up to this point has only been daughter in family, then you can look to see what is your position and your status within that family. What are the duties associated with that status? What do the other family members expect you to do? The expectations that those family members have, do they fit the general macro scale concepts of the family? Do you have unusual things that are expected of you that are outside the scope of family from a macro point of view? You're going to look at education system. Do you have a status affiliated with this? Do you have a status affiliated in the economy? These kinds of things, and do kind of an autobiography of all of how these sociology words can apply to you in your position now, what you hope to be in the future, and those kinds of things are what we're gonna look at. So these are examples of social institutions. These are not the definition of social institutions. I did not write the definition of social institutions on the board, because you can look that up in chapter 4, or simply know that, write down keywords like its beliefs, its norms, its processes that exist on the macro scale that ensure that the needs for the population in that society are fulfilled. So that's what a social institution is. Okay, these are examples of social institutions. If you need to review this discussion so you can write down what all these arrows mean, right? There was a lot of talking that brought us to those arrows, a lot of talking and a lot of explanations that brought us to these arrows between these social institutions. Because remember, if I was a good artist, I would draw this pretty chain link thing on the board here that shows the connection of all of these social institutions with each other. Okay, because they are linked together and they don't exist as individual books on a library shelf that have space between them. They are connected to each other. They're built up and designed around the expectations that each of them have. And in the United States, family, economy, education, legal system, religion, the military, government, keep on. There's a long list of social institutions, are all linked together using a set of USA norms and expectations that really guide the macro level society toward micro level life experience that we will work our way toward in future discussions from Chapter 4. So please take an opportunity to text me questions, email me questions. You know, texting is better, but text me questions that have popped up. Use the discussion board in Blackboard to post questions that you would like me to address the next time I make a video about this topic, or a continued discussion about this topic. I want to address your questions even though we're far away from each other and I can't do it in real time. Let's do it through that discussion board, and I can bring it up in the next video that I make, and also answer it in writing so everybody can read it in that discussion board. And please check your announcements in Blackboard, because I explain that the discussion board is not for points right now, but if you participate in that discussion board and interact with your classmates and interact with me, I will be able to use that level of participation as kind of a guide for me in the future. If you are on the cusp, if you're on the edge of, say, you have a C, but you're so close to a B, I can go back to look at that participation and the quality of your participation and the substance in your comments, and I can use that as a guide to help me decide, should this person who's right at that high end of a C, should that person actually earn, remember, I'm not giving anything, you're earning it. So did this person really earn a B even though the numbers add up to a C? So there's a little bit of leeway that you're in control of. The numbers are the numbers when you get your grades, but if you want that cushion that might help you bump up to that next letter grade, then please use that discussion board often. And if you post something and I don't check it within 24 hours, text me and say, hey, what's going on? I posted a question. Get to it when you can, please. And I'll do that. You know I will. So, okay. So I will see you next time on YouTube, and I look forward to reading your questions in my text message or on that discussion board, and we will talk about statuses and roles next time we see each other. Okay, bye.